Hi everyone, this is my story about experiencing homelessness as a high school student. When I was 17, my father kicked me out of the house. At the time, my father was traveling back and forth between Florida and Virginia, and Florida is where I lived. I was born in Miami, and I was attending high school in Davie, Florida. He traveled quite a bit, and it was rare that he was home, so he would come home on the weekends, or he would come home like every couple of weeks, or sometimes it was pretty lengthy if he was traveling for business. So sometimes it was like once a month. So on this occasion, I had come home from soccer practice and my father was home, and that was really exciting to me because I didn't see him frequently. And it's also important to know that my mother lived in Great Britain, and so I lived with my dad's girlfriend and her daughter, and that was a very challenging experience. I was a very respectful young adolescent child, and but it was a very difficult circumstance to live with people that I didn't know very well, and eventually had gotten to know better. Uh, and my father didn't really explain to me why I was living with them. But anyway, that was the circumstance. Basically, his business was in jeopardy in Virginia, and he had to save it, which I understand now, and I greatly appreciate his sacrifice and dedication. What I didn't understand at the time was that he was doing it for me. Like, I was the reason why he was grinding so hard. And as a parent now, I appreciate that, and I am very grateful. I saw my dad earlier today, and I told him, how much I appreciate him and I'm grateful to him, because he is the reason why I am so successful today, because he has 100% supported my education all the way through to my doctoral program. So I'm very grateful to him. But at the time, I didn't have the awareness or even understanding of what was going on around me, nor did anyone really take out the time to explain it. So that's the backstory. So I come home, my father is there, I'm excited to see him. And I know as soon as I open up the door that he's angry. And so I take off my cleats because I'm not allowed to wear them in the house on the tile floor. And I go into the dining room and just start studying. I had homework to do and I had a test the next day. I remember that very well because I was trying to focus and concentrate and listen to my dad, who was really angry. Sorry about that. My battery just popped up and said that I was low on a battery, so I needed to stop that. So I sit down, I get out my books and my homework, and I'm starting to do my homework. And my father comes in and starts yelling at me. And he turns on his heel and exits the dining room, and he's still yelling at me. He walks into the kitchen, right? So he's doing this like marching back and forth, and he's angry. So he's yelling at me, and he comes back in and he turns on his heel and he marches back into the kitchen, and he comes back into the dining room and starts yelling at me again and turns on his heel and goes into the kitchen. And I just remember that being so bizarre, that I had not seen my father in so long, and he was angry about something. And to this day, none of us can remember what he was angry about. I have my suspicions that my now stepmother told him something that I had done that angered him. And in reality, my father views me as an extension of himself. So on a parental level, now I get that. But he was so angry, and it was he was very antagonizing. And again, I don't remember what it was, but then after like the fourth or fifth time of him coming in and yelling at me, I had this very surreal moment. Our dining room at the time had was covered with mirrors on the other side of me, right? So I'm sitting across from this mirrored wall. And I remember looking at the mirror and having this conversation with myself internally and looking at myself and saying, this is messed up. I'm a good kid. Like I do whatever I'm asked to do. I clean up after myself. I pick up after myself. I do what I'm told. I'm not a troublemaker. And this is really messed up. So the next time my father came in to yell at me, I looked directly at him and I told him that he was a trucking basshole, except for the explicit words. And he was shocked and then took a deep breath in, pointed towards the door, and told me to get out. No daughter of mine is going to speak to me that way. Get out. And I looked at him and I just was resigned. And I was like, okay. So I packed up my book bag, all my notes and my books. I went to my room and got some clothes and I left. And I remember driving and automatically I was driving towards my school. I didn't know where to go. I didn't have any family. My mother lived in Great Britain, so it's not like I could call her and say, hey, can I come over? Dad just kicked me out of the house. So, and I didn't have any aunts or uncles or cousins, grandparents. I didn't have any relatives in the state of Florida. And I was lost. I pulled over in a neighborhood and I started crying and I was like, where am I going to go? Like, where am I going to go? The only place that I knew where to go was my school. So I drove to my high school. I pulled up in the student parking lot. I parked. I was shocked that the doors to my school was open. Now they wouldn't be, right? But I went in and I went into my English classroom. And I even remember like going to my desk and sitting down and taking out my homework and studying. And I remember that I had not had dinner and I was hungry. So I walked all the way back to my car and scrounged up change and went to the vending machine and got like a Pop-Tart, like a strawberry Pop-Tart. And I finished studying and I went back to my car and slept in my car. And I was so embarrassed by that. I didn't want anybody to see me. So the back seats of my car actually opened up to show the trunk of the car. So I slept with my body in the trunk of the car and my head like on the back seat. And I remember being cold and not having, a pillow, so it's like you're laying there and you're scared and like, I should have gotten a pillow. I should have gotten some blankets, but I had clothes. So I covered my body with my clothes that I had. And I used the clothes that I had as a pillow. So it was uncomfortable. I didn't sleep really well. I woke up really early and I remember just hearing my dad's words echoing through my head, get out. So I got up, I went back into the school. I took a shower. I didn't have a towel. And again, I was like, why didn't I pack a towel? And then I just went out to my car and I was drying my clothes out because they were wet, because that's what I dried my body off with, over the seats. And my friends started showing up for school and I just pretended like I had gotten there early and I went about my day. And still all throughout the day, I had this like underlying nagging, feeling of being really traumatized. And I kept thinking that my dad was going to show up at school, but he didn't. I went to soccer practice, and I distinctly remember my coach calling out my name, Eckenrod. And I looked over at him, and I was hoping that my dad was there, and he wasn't. My coach just wanted me to lead the stretching. And I find it really uncomfortable knowing that my dad and my now stepmom, didn't come to school to check on me. They didn't know where I was. We didn't have cell phones back then. And I went throughout my day hoping that they would show up, but they didn't. And that was a really kind of empty feeling, and I felt really let down. And I didn't know what to do. So after practice, I drove to my best friend's house. Her name was Lila Bayless. And I have to tell you that I will be forever grateful to Lila Bayless's mom. So I knock on Lila's door and I tell Lila what happened. And she's like, hang on a second. She actually lets me into her home because I'm her friend. And she goes and talks to her mom, and she said, my mom wants to talk to you. And one of the things that you have to understand is that Lila is biracial, so, and her mom is Black. And I remember sitting at the kitchen room table with her mom, and her mom, whenever I was at her house, Lila's house, her mom like pretty much left us alone. Like, she was friendly, but I didn't have a relationship with her. And so I'm sitting in the kitchen with Lila's mom, and she said, tell me what happened. And I told her, and I was very honest, and I said, I'm sorry for what I said to my dad, but I'm not sorry for standing up for myself. And I will never forget this, because her arms were like crossed, and we're having this conversation. It was really intimidating to be talking to your best friend's mom and basically asking if you could live with them. And when I said I was sorry for what I said, but I wasn't sorry for standing up for myself, she shook her head and she said, you can stay. And I just felt so relieved and so grateful. It was a 2-bedroom, 1-bath house, and I would get up really early because I didn't want to be a burden to anybody, and I didn't want to hog like all the hot water. So I would wake up really early and take a shower and take a really fast shower. And I still worked, and I still went to school, and I still went to soccer practice. And I would leave Lila's mom, because I would wake up so early, I would leave Lila's mom a note to thank her, and I would leave her money on the counter. And really, I had no idea at that time, at 17, I had no idea how much things cost. I was a junior in high school. I didn't understand electricity bills, water bills, mortgage payments, rent, cable. I didn't understand all of that. So I just left the amount of money that I thought was appropriate. And I bought my own groceries. And, I've often wondered, looking back, like, I never told my teachers. And because I functioned at a really high level, I kept going to school. I kept doing my homework, I was engaged in soccer, and I was a leader on my team. And I never told them, and I don't think they would have known, because outwardly, my behaviors as a student didn't change. And there weren't any support services in place for kids like me that I was aware of. Now we have the McKinney-Vento Act, and we have homeless liaisons embedded within our school systems. And we have forms at the beginning of the school year that track housing needs and things like that, so we can catch students. And I'm always shocked that I kept doing what I was doing, and I didn't know any different. I didn't know there was an option to drop out. I didn't know there was an option, I guess I was managing so well and could take care of myself financially because I still had a job, that I could pay for my gas in the car. And that probably would have been my biggest inhibitor. But I slept with Lila Bayless in her bed. We shared a bed together, and I had my clothes in a stack on her floor. And I don't remember how I did my laundry, but I must have done it at her house, maybe at a laundromat. I don't remember. But I was homeless for a significant amount of time. I remember that my birthday had passed, and I didn't have contact with my family. And I remember that Christmas passed and I didn't have contact with my family. And I remember going over to the house, to my now stepmom's house, my dad's girlfriend at the time, and they had presents for me. And I just remember being so, like, they were really meaningless to me. My dad was not there, he was out of town again. And so I remember like unwrapping the presents and being like, these mean nothing to me. Like, they're just material things and they had no meaning. But one of the reasons why I support Black Lives Matter, um, because of Lila and her mom. You know, they took me in and supported me, or at least gave me shelter. And I, like I said before, I don't know what I would have done without her. And eventually I did go back home after several months, but it was still really rocky and I did not want to be there. And I met someone and started dating someone who was a little older than me when I was a senior in high school. So I was never home. I was never home, so to speak. And then after that, after I graduated high school, I went to a community college and continued to be in a relationship with this young man. And then at 19, I moved to Virginia. And that was a very powerful moment for me. I had spent my summers in Virginia. That's where my family is from, Patrick County. And I spent my summers with my cousins, and we're very, very close. And I remember one afternoon when I was 19 at my great-grandmother's house, because I would stay at my great-grandmother Nellie Bowman's house. I would stay at my Aunt Bobby's house. She was like my grandmother. She really replaced my grandmother when my grandmother passed when I was 12. And then I would stay probably most of the time at my cousin Wanda's house, because she had two children that were my cousins, and we were very close. They were my age, Amy and Cliff. And then Aunt Bobby had a daughter, Joy, who was a little older than us, but still within our age range. So I became very, very close with them, and I have great childhood memories with them. But anyways, my cousin Cliff and I will never forget this day. It was like towards the end of summer, and we were sitting on my grandmother's front porch, and I think we were like snapping green beans or something like that for my grandmother. And I was dreading going back to Florida. And I had a plane ticket, and I was just really resistant. I did not want to go home. I did not, my dad wasn't there a lot, and it wasn't a home to me. And so I'm talking to my cousin Cliff, and he looked at me and he said the most powerful thing. And it was a moment that changed my life. And he said, Wendy, if you love it here so much, why don't you move here? And for the first time in my life, I realized that I had choice. I had control. I could make my own decisions. And it was the greatest epiphany that I have ever experienced. And I just looked at him and I was like, yeah. So I went back to Florida with an empty suitcase. And my dad's girlfriend picked me up at the airport, and I think one of her friends was with her. And she lifted up my suitcase off the carousel, and she looked at me and she said, "Oh, you're moving." And it was said in such a nasty way that it was paralyzing, And I said, yeah, I am. And so I remember packing up everything that I owned that I could fit inside that same suitcase. I had to make decisions about, you know, things that I would leave behind, things that I really cherished. And that was my, that's when I decided to move to Virginia. And it was one of the best decisions, aside from going to college and really focusing on my studies. That was the best decision that I have ever made in my entire life. um, a couple other things that I want to say is that I probably parent differently compared to other parents of teenagers because of my homeless experience. I try to give my children a lot more freedom and independence because I know that they can do, I know that they can, I know they can survive. I survived. And so I try to give them freedom to make their decisions. And so far, they haven't had any harsh consequences. But I talk to them and continuously talk to them. And my oldest son, he's 17, and sometimes I look at him and I think, at your age, I was on my own. And sometimes that's hard because I look at him and I recognize how vulnerable he is. And I look back and now I know I was so vulnerable, but I didn't know it. And that's a tough thing for me. I know he could make it, but he's vulnerable and people could take advantage of him and exploit him. And so I try to teach my kids life skills, how to protect themselves, and how to function independently. So that is why I advocate for that population, and that's why it's important to me to do research around that population. Now, homeless kids become unaccompanied youth like I was for a lot of different reasons. One of the biggest reasons was abuse. When they're old enough to be able to have mobility, and they're old enough to be able to realize that what they're experiencing is wrong and it's abusive, then they choose to leave the home. Other reasons why children are homeless is because of their sexuality. About 40% of homeless youth are identify as LGBTQ, and unfortunately they come out and they are not accepted by their parents and they're kicked out of the home. Other reasons that I've seen in the high schools is I've worked with administrators and principals and even myself as a school counselor, is that sometimes parents are unable to take care of their children because of their own difficulties financially, and then some parents just don't care. I had one young man who was in a very similar, when I was a school counselor, a senior in high school, male, and I were talking. I was trying to help him navigate his next steps after high school. And I will never forget what he said. He said, "I wish my mom just cared." And that was really heartbreaking to hear. The other thing I'd like to say in closing is that I know it's really easy to judge my father. And, to this day, none of us can remember what he was angry about. But it's easy to judge him harshly. And when I look back at him, yes, I don't think that he handled the situation very well. I think he was really reactive. But I always have known that he loves me, and he has always been my rock and my foundation. And he has been that one person in my life. And so I hope that you won't judge my father because, what I'd also like to say about my dad is that when I did go to college, he paid my tuition. And if that wasn't enough, he was the only adult in my life that supported me. He was the only adult in my life that called me in college to check on me, to see how I was doing. And he called me often. We're very close, my father and I. And he was the only one to come to my honors awards inductions and ceremonies. He was the only adult in my life to come up and visit me and take me out to lunch and to dinner. He was the only adult that gave me spending money to help me. I did have a job all through college, sometimes two jobs when I was a graduate student, but he was the only one, and that says a lot. That says a lot. So for those of you out there who are college students, I want to encourage you to keep going. And for those of you who are parents watching this, please overtly show your child in some way that you love and care about them. And I'll say one last thing, and probably the main reason why I focus on parenting and parenting skills and offer the workshops that I do is to increase the relationship between the parent and child, to decrease child abuse and neglect, but also to decrease homelessness among unaccompanied youth. And so now that you know my story, you can understand why, on a very personal level, why I do what I do. So thank you for watching.